In March of 2014, the largest anti-sexual assault organization in the United States repudiated the rhetoric and the narrative of rape culture. Quoting them, "In the last few years there has been an unfortunate trend towards blaming rape culture for the extensive problems of sexual violence on campus. While it is helpful to point out the systematic barriers to addressing the problem, it is important not to lose sight of a simple fact. Rape is caused not by cultural factors, but by the conscious decisions of a small percentage of the community to commit a violent crime. In short, there is no rape culture, and there never was one. But the constructed narrative of rape culture certainly does exist. So what we actually have then is a rape culture. And it's exhausting. Indeed, rape culture is both physically and morally exhausting to not just those supposedly targeted as potential victims of rape. It's utterly exhausting to the point of numbness to those cast against their will into the role of villain. Don't forget to hiss and throw your popcorn as the bad guy enters from stage left. Hi, I'm John the Other, and today I'm doing a sort of open letter style video to the YouTube feminists. Some listeners might recognize this already. Apart from writing content for sites like Community Organized Compassion and Kindness, run by Diana Davison and myself, and having written over 300 articles for other men's rights sites, the preceding quote is the opening of the most popular YouTube video I've ever done. It's the video in which, 5 years ago, I famously said, "I don't give a fuck about the victims of rape." I have included the transcript of that video in this article. It is not my intent to explain away that rant I recorded and uploaded, which so many people have gleefully copied and reposted in the conviction that their appropriation of that video constitutes some kind of conversation-stopping gotcha. No. What I said, which I have transcribed and included within this article, was inadequate. When I recorded that video 5 years ago, I did not go far enough. A failing this revisitation is intended to correct. So once again, hi, I'm John the Other, and today I'm doing a sort of open letter style video to the YouTube feminists. In hindsight, I referenced YouTube feminists 5 years ago because that was the relatively small pond I was working within, and it was what I was aware of. I would now include Twitter feminists, Tumblr feminists, Facebook feminists, and every other social media landscape where this cult's members congeal and propagate their poisonous hatred. If you're not one of these people, this is not for you. But to the YouTube feminists, and I mean the Nuclear Knights, the Jedi Master Boo-Boos, the Diana Bostons, the Antique Lenses of the world, and all of your little friends. I'm going to have to interrupt myself again here. Those names are of now defunct YouTube accounts. I have included them here because the accuracy in transcribing that old rant matters if what I left out of that video is to be appropriately corrected. But returning to that transcript, to social media gender ideologues, to the cultivators and promoters of harm, to purposefully and publicly deceitful profiteers of the domestic violence industry, to violence against women propagandists, to rape culture gender studies acolytes, to the willful spreaders of lies, to opportunist politicians and celebrities signing on to the latest bandwagon to earn the favor of the other people's money-spending demographic, to all of you. This is for you. You have had an effect. Collectively, you have had an effect. You have got through to some of the evil men on YouTube and in the world, I expect. Now, interjecting again, I referred both then as now to the mainstream's dogged clinging to variations of the public myth of rape culture, the attendant degrading of all men, and the attached reduction of all women in our social narrative to non-acting passive receptacles for harm to be poured into. And the effect that you've had probably isn't the one you were aiming for. The effect I think you were aiming for was to shame us all, to silence us, to make us bow our heads in shame and just fucking go along with your sick, twisted, hateful agenda. That's not the effect you've had. The effect you've had is that I, a man, don't give a fuck about rape victims anymore. How can anybody still take rape seriously? What was once universally understood to be a violent crime is now nothing except an empty demonization routinely shouted by feral, half-educated social justice warrior bullies. How can anybody still look even at actual rape victims and still muster any real human sympathy? We are all emotionally exhausted beyond numbness, beyond cynicism, and into a place where loathing grows. After years of getting the feminist firehose right into my face, including being told, never mind my male friends and relatives who fell within the 4 out of 5 North American suicides who are male, that they, like me, because of our sex, are members of a class of oppressors, rapists, and evildoers of every imaginable stripe. I cannot force myself to give a shit. I know intellectually I should. I know that rape is a terrible crime and being subject to it is a terrible thing. But I don't give a fuck. And the reason I don't give a fuck is you, YouTube feminists. And, of course, Tumblr feminists and Twitter feminists and campus feminists, screaming and spitting into the faces of people who just wanted to hear an academic speak, even if they disagreed with him. But no, those members of the public were, in your rhetoric, rape apologists for wanting to hear somebody you didn't approve of. You victim cult members, you female supremacist assholes. Yes, I lay this blame on you. Blame for what? For not giving a fuck about your preferred victim demographic. Fuck them and fuck you. But perhaps it's not simple blame. I'm just making an analysis of cause and effect here. See, you have, for so long, repeated this mantra. All men are evil. All men are rapists. You're a rapist. You're a rapist. Rape, 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 rape. That is all I've heard from your camp for the entire time I've been talking publicly about human rights, which, when I recorded the original version of this rant, the one we are now revisiting, was about 3 years, and I can no longer find myself giving a shit. Not then, and not now. When I first said those words, it was after 3 years of trying, honestly, with good intention, to engage in productive dialogue with feminists. The response, from the camp of gender ideology, was abuse, accusation, censure, threats of violence, attempts at initiation of violence through various forms of proxy, and a continuously escalating narrative of personal complicity in a climate of support for commission of a crime of female targeting rape. A climate which, by the way, has never existed in my lifetime. Guilt, shame, accusation, and abuse all justified with a narrative claiming something that clearly and obviously doesn't exist. The result is an obvious one. Specifically, that result is emotional exhaustion, spiritual depletion, erosion of goodwill, and disillusion of the natural partnership that has existed between men and women. And rape, at one time a clearly definable violent crime, as a term now encompasses after-the-fact reversal of consent after sex. It encompasses the consumption of alcohol, but only for women, since men, for whatever reason, retain their adult agency after drinking, while women, in this narrative, do not. Rape now encompasses the lack of an enthusiastically, positively affirmed and repeated, unambiguous yes, put your dick in me now, signed in triplicate and filed a week in advance with the federal, provincial, or state and municipal departments of vagina. Never mind that for real human beings, having sex with one another, indirection, innuendo, and plausible deniability all feature centrally in all acts of sexual seduction. And in case anybody imagines this is all too much hyperbole, the legal model for so-called enthusiastic consent, all other sex being rape, is now being written into law. So we return to the transcript of that long ago video, the one gender ideologues continue stupidly to re-upload as if it is some sort of gotcha that any man should be shamed and silenced by, like, fuck. My giving of fucks has been utterly exhausted, worn down, eroded by years of rhetorical abuse, logical drivel, self-contradictory, self-selected victim cultivation, and threat narrative construction, with me and every other man cast against our will into the role of subhuman monster. Well, not just every other man, most particularly those of us whose sense of self was strong enough to say to the gender ideological zeitgeist that no, victim cult members, you, hate mongers, you, violence by proxy practitioners, do not define me, will not define me, and you will not decree who and what my sexual identity is or means. And my giving of fucks for victims in the self-selecting victim class has been exhausted. I don't give a flying fuck about rape victims anymore. The real ones. Not the fake victims like you. Not the fake victims. The fake victims, you think we can't tell the difference between an actual and a fake one? Ha! No. But you see, I don't give a flying fuck about real rape victims anymore. And you, gender ideologues, promoters of hatred and human harm for your own profit, you are the cause. You have completely numbed me because of your endless repetition of this mantra that all men are victimizers and all women are victims. Women are all at continuous risk to be raped at any second. I don't give a fuck. I'm truly emotionally depleted and exhausted by the decades-long repetition of the victim identity narrative. And I am not the only one. I'm not even one of a small number whose capacity for caring about a monotonous, absurdist, and toxic combination of victim and threat narrative has been exhausted by prolonged abuse. In all likelihood, you don't give a fuck either about the victims of so-called rape. You have been tired out, worn down, and emotionally exhausted. You, whatever your views are, whatever your political leanings are, you're still just another human being. You cannot live within our culture's fire hose of messaging about how much women are victimized with every breath of air they breathe and the poisonous proximity to penises to their pretty pick panties without suffering a similar exhaustion of empathic capacity. You don't give a fuck about the victims of rape either. And the 40 years of ongoing public hype, the decades of rape culture, the endless reminders that your male sexuality is just a toxic, predatory evil. That is why you don't give a fuck about the so-called victims of rape either. Even the type of violent, life-altering, and devastating rape, we all used to understand what was meant when that word was used 20 years ago, before the meaning was so diluted that it now includes she changed her mind about the dude bro she brought home from the bar after she woke up hungover with a case of the crotch crabs the next day. Nobody cares. Because nobody can care for long when the healthy, non-pathological human sexuality that all men share is pathologized, and you live under a continuous message that despite all evidence to the contrary, you are nothing but a rapist waiting for the right opportunity. This is the climate we inhabit. So how can you continue to give two shits for the so-called victims of rape? You're human and you have human limits, so obviously you can't and you don't care. But you'd better not ever admit it. You'd better never fucking admit it. Because you will be vilified, excoriated. You'll be called a creep and a predator and a rape apologist, maybe even a rapist. If you do not bend your knee, tug on your forelock, and pledge devotion. And that you, unlike the bad man, you really care. See, you're one of the good men. Look, here's your good man card. And it's got an up-to-date stamp of approval on it, too. What a good, obedient member of the club you are. You can even recite the Pledge of Approval Consensus Identity Conferral on demand. You wouldn't want the women folk or their compliant male enforcers to take away your good man card, would you? So, out in the real world, if I encounter a rape in progress, what am I going to do? Stop it? No. I'm going to walk around it. or past it. But why? Why am I going to walk around it? Wouldn't a real man stop it? Probably. But that's a real man by an alternative definition. Which is to say, that's a real man by the definition of radical feminists of the world, where a real man is a disposable and eager dispenser and absorber of violence for the questionable benefit or the convenience of any nearby female. I no longer give a fuck. Why don't I give a fuck? Well, intellectually I care. I care about people being harmed. But when it comes to rape, I no longer care because, like every other male alive in 2014, like so many others, I have been subject to an endless torrent of accusation that constitutes our modern feminist-dominated zeitgeist. Like so many others, I've been numbed by it. The word rape and its associated meaning used to shock me. It used to upset me. It used to be something requiring action to stop or to oppose, and now, after years of numbing repetition and abuse of that word's high emotional shock value, it means nothing. It's just an abstract idea. It's a hypothetical claim of victimhood for self-selecting victims. And yeah, I still know there's real rape happening to somebody somewhere, but I'm numb to that. I'm exhausted and I don't care. Not anymore. And no amount of effort to shame me back into compliance as a cheerful, self-selecting rescuer will do anything except to harden my rational evaluation that the entire socially constructed dynamic of good man or bad man and victim or even potential victim, it's all a pathetic sham. It's a grift. It's a con, practiced by trading on the artificially manufactured shame of decent men. Let's back up a few feet here. Included in the standard social contract is the old idea that a man, when faced by the prospect of a woman in danger, must, with no consideration for his own well-being, fling himself into whatever action is required to protect her from harm. However, running against this narrative is the one in which men are worthless, men are rapists, at least in potential, men objectify and oppress women, and so on. But almost no man actually buys into this last narrative as a reality, since men, knowing themselves, they know they aren't rapists, oppressors, and so on, but that's the cultural climate they live in. Meanwhile, just as we all live with variations of men are rapey, worthless, testosterone-driven scum, we simultaneously weather a continued narrative that men must step up, men must protect women, men must respect women, and on goes that repetitive narrative as well. What, in all of this cultural trash-talking, is there to respect? What motive is there to stand up on behalf of anyone from the leisure caste on whose behalf all the scorn and hatred and rape culture rhetoric has been constantly shouted? Not even considering the emotional exhaustion of a 40-year fraud about so-called culture of women objectification, rape culture, and all other claims of feminine victimization. So what if, against all chance, you find yourself really and for true the victim of a violent rape? Tough shit. Just one of the created problems in the feminist narrative and its reliance on shame to coerce and command male service, sacrifice, and protective behavior can be described as follows. The gender ideological urge to compel an accepted standard of male self-sacrificing benefit of women depends on men's sensitivity to and sympathy for women, in a narrative positing the duress of women as a class. However, in view of the hyperbole and the fraud of this narrative of feminine duress, the claim of male participation in feminine oppression and suffering is used as a scourge against men to compel the conformity to that model of service, sacrifice, and provision towards women. The scourging is effective explicitly because men are not the sadistic, malevolent class of sociopaths that this narrative posits, and the cultural accusation against men is felt by the majority of non-sadist men as a real and ongoing agony. Human beings are social creatures. It is only a sociopath who can be labeled a sociopath without feeling real and serious pain at that accusation, and indeed the cultural accusation from the gender ideological narrative is painful, or it would not be effective, and continually relied on to compel the obedience of men. In company with this psychic scourging, those so coerced must also continue to experience a protective impulse and empathy towards those who scourge them. Those they are to be motivated by that coercion to rescue, to service, and to provision. But protective impulse and empathy are directly eroded by the same group to be provisioned, who themselves are also delivering that cultural-wide narrative of accusation. But that's the climate men inhabit. Culturally normal censure and accusation, along with the social requirement to provision, to protect, and to service the group on whose behalf the narrative of censure operates. So how is it that after decades of such acculturation, men as a class do not now universally despise those they have been accused of oppressing, and men don't despise women? I refer to the sexual class whose self-appointed representatives, that's feminists, are the deliverers of ongoing scorn and abuse towards men. Those who participate in the maintenance and the escalation of this cultural narrative do so with the intent to inflict pain, and through that pain to compel their target's conformity to their own accepted model for obedience, limitations on thought, conformity of conduct, with pain as the tool of control. We're talking about a sadistic and authoritarian ideology here. Sadists who recognize no limit on what they can do to other human beings, attempting to force compliance with an increasingly totalitarian philosophy. Why in this climate don't men hate women? And they don't, despite the best efforts to cultivate that hate by gender ideologues who conflate the concept of their movement with women. A couple of possibilities exist, factors which likely manifest in concert within the wider male consensus point of view on women. Most obviously, women are not feminism. One is an ideology, the other is a group of people identifiable by their sex. However, that recognition is an intellectual one, while most people, most of the time, operate on their instinct and their emotions, and they use their intellect mainly for post-facto rationalization of their emotional impulses or decisions. So, what are the reasons that men do not now hate women? Well, that's Chapter 5. This has been a reading of Chapter 4 of You Can't Hate Me Because I'm Right. Chapter 4, I Don't Give a Fuck About Rape. Feminists or others who would like a transcript of this chapter, please send an email to John, John, at canadiancock.org and put requested chapter in the subject line. And to everybody else, thanks for listening and have a great day.